The finalists for the Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award came out at noon Central Standard Time, and Coach Prime was not on it. We got to talk about what that means and why that is, and about the 9 finalists that are on this thing and whether or not Prime deserves to be there. What's up, kid folk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show, please subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss any of the reaction segments, instant reaction segments, news that we talk about here on the show. And like this video if you found it informative, if you found it entertaining. If you just want to share it with other people, that would be great. Really helps the show grow. We're at 121,000 subscribers, and we're growing pretty quickly. It's very cool to see how big this community is going, and you can see that in the comments of any one of these segments, there's a lively discussion. I'm down there. I'm also acknowledging who I think has a good point, who I think doesn't have a good point. And every now and again, you might get a clap back from me personally because, well, I was getting a PhD in English, which also means I was getting a PhD in rhetoric. And given that my job is sports talk and debate and Toastmasters is basically what I do, you're going to get the full dose from me because I love college football and I love talking about it. And that's one of the things that college football is great for, is being talked about, because we have still not come up with a great way to crown a national champion. Even as we've gotten closer and even as we've seen other tournaments that can work, we haven't done a great job of doing this. And frankly, we haven't even done a great job of acknowledging what it means to be a Coach of the Year finalist and how you can win National Coach of the Year. Now, the Eddie Robinson Award is named after legendary Grambling State coach Eddie Robinson, who really put HBCU football on the map. Perhaps not the greatest HBCU football coach. I mean, Jake Gaithers at FAMU, he's got something to say about that, as does John Merritt at Tennessee State. I mean, we can keep going to Billy at Prairie View A&M. I mean, the kind of players that came out of the Eddie Robinson era of football that basically starts in the 1940s and ends around the early 2000s. I mean, it's Pro Football Hall of Famer after Pro Football Hall of Famer that he played against or coached. Doug Williams being at the top of the list, black quarterback drafted from Grambling State to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the black quarterback journey really has Eddie Robinson as a central figure to it, and really gives us this idea of being able to talk about college football from a national standpoint, and race is a big part of it, right? We didn't really integrate college football until 1970, and that's one of the reasons we still reference HBCU football. It's what we were going to play, right? When we still had separate but equal, Eddie Robinson was getting it in Louisiana at Grambling, and I thought naming this award after him was a really cool move, and one of the ways in which we get to talk about his legacy and what the sport has done for over 150 years and how it has evolved. One of the great awards, I think, in this sport, alongside the Heisman Trophy, the Blitnikoff Award, the Davey O'Brien, the Doak Walker, I can keep going here, Outland, Bednarik, Nagurski, see what I mean? I love this stuff. Jim Thorpe. Is this Eddie Robinson Coach of the Year award, because you don't need to be the best coach in the sport to get it. As a matter of fact, this is one of those years where the coach that's got the only undefeated team in the sport, Dan Lanning, is a finalist, probably won't win, because we usually like to reward an epic turnaround, a coaching performance that came seemingly out of nowhere. Nobody predicted it. Nobody had it on their radar. And that is why we choose to acknowledge that person and his program as it is. So the 9 finalists, right, include guys like Curt Cignetti, who I put #1 on my ballot, as I only get these 9 to choose from, because what Indiana football had been prior to his arrival, which is mostly and at worst a laughing stock, right? Indiana's a basketball school for good reason, right? Great basketball tradition, not great football tradition. Had never won 10 games in a single season, had been playing football for over 100 years. They did that this year. Had never won 11 games in a single season, and they did that this year, and they didn't need a bowl game to do it, and they didn't need a conference championship to do it. They did it with the 12 that we've been playing since 2006. Remarkable feat by Curt Cignetti and the Indiana Hoosiers, with a bunch of guys that aren't going to be a first-round draft picks. Like, they could be, but not guys that we're ready to say, for instance, Curtis Rourke is going to get drafted in the first round. We're not saying that. We're not saying that Elijah Surratt is going to get drafted in the first round at wide receiver. We are saying that Indiana is one of the 12 best teams in college football, and they made the college football playoff for the first time in their history. And we're basically an Ohio State win away from playing in the Big Ten championship game against the Oregon Ducks. And then we would have had 2 undefeated teams in the Big Ten championship, which would have been great. The other guy that I think kind of narrowly gets in here, and this is where we can begin to start talking about where Prime would rate, is Shane Beamer, who coached South Carolina in 9-3 after they were picked basically to finish in the bottom half of the league, the SEC, which I still believe is the toughest league in the sport, have 6 ranked wins. Their losses are against ranked opponents. The schedule became really daunting for them, and they were able to get wins that, frankly, Alabama couldn't win, like Oklahoma, right? Even though Alabama was able to beat South Carolina. South Carolina also able to get past other teams that we just didn't think were that good, were going to be better than them. And as we got closer and closer to the end of this thing, they became a bubble team. South Carolina was a team that, if things broke their way, they might get into the college football playoff, but 3 losses was just a bridge too far for the committee and for me and for you, right? We didn't want to see a 3-loss team this year in the college football playoff at all, but a 10-2 South Carolina probably makes this thing. And the way in which Alabama has whined about not making the playoff is the way that South Carolina probably would whine, except to say they haven't been a perennial national favorite. And frankly, they haven't been that good for some time, right? Got to go back to, well, Jack in Georgia between their hedges with, Will Muschamp is your head coach. And then Shane Beamer comes in, and it feels like a great fit. It's up and down. It's hard to win in that league, and he goes and he wins 9 games. I think that with Colorado and Coach Prime winning 9 games, going 9-3, with Travis Hunter being a Heisman finalist, with Shedeur Sanders being a Davey O'Brien Award finalist, you got arguments here. Plus the turnaround, right? 4-8 to 9-3. That's the thing to keep in mind. Like when I was going back to Indiana, they won 9 games previous 3 years. They won 11 this year. Spencer Danielson's on this thing. Boise State head coach Ashton Jeanty obviously is his tailback and the best tailback in the sport. Nearly 2,500 yards, 29 touchdowns, not 19. That's on me. That's a typo. 7.3 yards per carry. Boise State made the college football playoff in the 12-team format, just the second group of 5 team to make this thing, period. Cincinnati did it in the 4-team format, and they earned a bye. They earned the number 3 seed as the number 9 team ahead of teams like Texas and Notre Dame. That's pretty remarkable. ACC champion Clemson. Now, the rules are the rules and broke that way, but Spencer Danielson coached that team, and they don't get enough credit for how good they are as a defense and what Maddox Madsen has meant to them as a quarterback. But they're going to get a chance to show that in about 3 weeks' time. We got Kenny Dillingham on this thing, who also had another remarkable turnaround. Goes from 3-9 last year to 10-2, and the Arizona State Sun Devils are the Big 12 champs. Cam Scattaboo, maybe the second best tailback in the sport. Over 1,300 yards, nearly 1,400 yards rushing. Narrowly, I think, missed out on being invited to New York as a Heisman finalist, but certainly going to get votes. I expect him to finish in the top 10 there. Really turned that roster over, believed in it, got Brian Ward's defense going. Marcus Arroyo was a Broyles Award finalist as offensive coordinator. Sam Levitt comes from Michigan State. Jordan Tyson turns into the kind of guy that we expect to compete for the Biletnikoff Award next year. Outstanding year for them, as they also earned a first-round bye with winning the Big 12 championship and that number 4 seed behind Boise State. And then we got Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, 11-1, only lost to Northern Illinois, which the further we get away from it, looks a little less bad. I still think it's one of the worst losses by anybody all year, given what Northern Illinois turned out to be, which is not much, and what Notre Dame has traditionally wanted to be. But they got the first-round matchup. They are going to host Indiana. Marcus Freeman getting 11 wins at Notre Dame, not too shabby. Dan Lanning's team is 13-0. They're the 1 seed. Dylan Gabriel has been outstanding. He's a Heisman finalist. You would expect him to get a bunch of votes because they're the only undefeated team left. And Ducks fans be like, what are we even talking about here? We got the head coach that got the only undefeated team and the number 1 team in the country. What are we doing? I understand that, right? But it's not usually how we evaluate, and not how I evaluate. If I expect you to be a top 4 team at the start, it's real difficult for me to make you the national coach of the year. Same thing with Georgia and Kirby Smart on this thing, right? If Ryan Day had been on this thing, I would not have probably put him among my top 3. You get 5 votes here. Rhett Lashley, SMU, same difference, I think, with Boise State, with Indiana, except to say they won their conference championship last year. They were good last year. They walked into a bigger, badder arena, and they are yet to lose an ACC game until they got to the ACC championship game. Obviously, they lost that to Clemson, but their regular season resume was good enough that they were able to get into this college football playoff. Not bad for a private university in Dallas that has not been this good for quite some time. And then there's Army with Jeff Monken, who goes 11-1. Only loss is bad to Notre Dame, but it is to Notre Dame. They win their conference championship, the first year winning a conference championship. It's also a team that went from independent, again, to winning a conference championship in what I think is the second or even first, depending on how you want to look at it, best of the group of 5, right? Let's make them 2 for now because Mountain West and Boise State got that seeding. But Army going 10-1 with an opportunity to finish 11-1 with a win on Saturday against Navy, not too shabby. Where would Prime be here? I think that you should have had 10 finalists. That's what I think. Now, we get to say you snubbed him because, well, we all looked at that roster last year. We saw him turn it over. We looked at that team last year. They go 4-8. They get to top 25 ranking. They have an opportunity to win 10 games the first time since 2016. Travis Hunter going both ways and what he's been able to do and how you coach that dude. Same thing with Shador. Same thing with Jimmy Horn and when he's healthy. Will Shepard, Draylon Miller, that defense with Shiloh and Cameron Stillman-Craig and DJ McKinney. Preston Hodge when he was available. I just think it would have been easy to make this 10. I don't know why we stopped at 9 here. 9's an odd number. Also, now I don't have to make a segment about who is not on this thing, but who is on it, right? And the reason we're talking about Coach Prime being left off this thing is there's quite a few people that think that, hey, look, that man should have probably been Big 12 Coach of the Year. Hard, because Arizona State won the Big 12 championship and was picked dead last in the Big 12, while Colorado was picked 11 out of 16. It's just a talking point you didn't even have. And if I was able to talk to the Football Writers Association who puts together these beforehand, I would have advised, just add him. He won't win, probably shouldn't win, but add him. Why are you bringing all this noise around Eddie Robinson's name? That's my thought. Who do you think should be the National Coach of the Year and win the Eddie Robinson Award? Put it in the comments below.